You're sure she doesn't suspect anything? Evelyn's voice cut through the kitchen wall like a splinter. I froze. I hadn't even shut the front door behind me yet. The floor creaked under my heel, and I instinctively stepped back, letting it close with a soft click. My purse slipped off my shoulder and hit the floor. Soft, muted, like it knew better than to make a sound right now. She's too soft. Evelyn continued, her voice sharp and syrupy in that sanctimonious way she always used when she thought she was being helpful. That place in the mountains. Daniel deserves that, not her. It was your idea anyway, sweetie. Daniel let out a laugh that made my spine curl. She'll hand it over, he said. She's passive and stupid. If you're here, still listening, don't forget to subscribe and like the video. I know 97% of you won't, but it means the world to the team bringing you these stories. And honestly, this one's just getting started. I didn't breathe. My fingers clenched the strap of my purse so hard I thought it would snap. My heart wasn't pounding, it was something worse. Slower, colder, the kind of chill that sinks into your bones when you realize you were never actually loved, just tolerated until you were convenient to use. Passive, stupid, 8 years. I'd nursed his mother through 2 surgeries, spent nights reading pill bottles with a flashlight because Evelyn refused to turn on the lamp after 10. I'd handled every bill, even the ones in his name. When he overdrafted our joint account last year, I didn't ask where the money went. I just quietly transferred my savings. I never used it against him, never raised my voice, but now I knew. This whole time, they were just waiting for the moment I became valuable. Not as a person, as a piece of property. The papers in my purse were still warm from the lawyer's printer. Final confirmation. The apartments on Holovna Street and Franca Avenue, mine. The dacha near Yaremche, also mine, not ours. Not something to share. My grandmother had been very clear in her will. She knew how Evelyn spoke to me. She'd seen Daniel's smirks. I thought she'd left me those properties because she loved me. Turns out she'd left them because she knew I'd need them. I didn't move. Their voices kept going, like 2 vultures pecking at a body they assumed was already dead. She'll probably offer it up like a gift, Evelyn said, laughing. She always wants to be the good one. Oh, she will, Daniel replied. Once we take her name off the title, she can stay in the city. That mountain place is going to need work, but it's got potential. I had to grip the wall to stay upright. Somewhere between her smugness and his greed, something inside me broke. But not like glass, not loud, not tragic. It was like a lock clicking open in the back of my mind, and for the first time in 8 years, I realized I didn't have to explain myself to anyone. I turned around. I didn't slam the door, didn't announce my presence, I didn't confront. I just walked out. In my car, I didn't cry. I drove 3 blocks, pulled over in front of a park I used to jog in before Evelyn moved in, and made comments about my thick ankles. My phone buzzed with a message from Daniel. I didn't open it. I opened my glove compartment instead and took out the copy of my grandmother's will, the part that said sole beneficiary, the part that had Daniel's name nowhere on it. It wasn't until that moment that I realized I hadn't smiled in weeks, maybe months. Not a real one, not one that didn't feel like it was stitched onto my face for someone else's benefit. I texted my friend Olena and asked if I could crash with her. No explanation, just, "Can I stay over tonight?" She replied within seconds. Always. As I drove to her place, I kept hearing Daniel's voice echo in my head. Passive, stupid. Let him think that. Let him believe I'd just hand everything over. I was done playing soft. I stood there in the dim hallway, shoes still wet from the rain, holding my breath like it would stop time. The house smelled like overcooked cabbage and whatever cheap perfume Evelyn insisted on spraying in the kitchen like it was Febreze. I used to find comfort in that smell. Now it made my stomach turn. "She'll hand it over," Daniel said again, his voice smug with that nasal chuckle he used when he thought he was being clever. "She wants to be thanked for once. We'll act grateful. Then I'll get the papers in front of her. Give her some story about joint ownership for tax purposes." "Exactly," Evelyn chimed in. "Frame it as protection. Say you're watching out for her. She'll melt." "Like she always does." Another laugh. I pressed my back against the wall, fingers digging into the seam of the plaster like I could vanish into it. I didn't feel tears. I didn't feel anger. Not yet. I felt a silence crawl over me. The kind that wraps around your throat and dares you to scream. This wasn't some heat of the moment slip. This wasn't Evelyn getting mouthy or Daniel blowing off steam. This was a plan, a strategy, discussed in my kitchen, with my name, my property, my life folded neatly between their voices like a napkin they were about to wipe their mouths with. My purse thudded softly to the floor. Inside it, the papers were signed and notarized. Those properties were mine. There was no clause, no loophole, no shared inheritance. I knew that. They didn't. And now I knew something else too. I wasn't their wife, or daughter-in-law, or caregiver. I was a stepping stone, a transaction waiting to be processed. "She's lucky," Evelyn added with a huff. "Your grandmother was generous. I don't know why she liked her so much." "Probably because she never talked back," Daniel said, grabbing something from the fridge. "Just like I trained her." That one almost made me move. I felt my knee jerk slightly, like my body wanted to burst through the kitchen door and throw the first thing I could grab. A glass, a chair, myself. But I didn't. I stood still, and I listened. They started talking logistics, when to bring up the paperwork, how to phrase it, even whether Evelyn should leave the room to make it less threatening. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. After everything I had done, every time I'd bent backward to accommodate Evelyn's diet, her moods, her awful stories about how wives used to know their place, after every time I'd covered for Daniel's missed payments, every half-assed excuse he gave when I found lipstick on receipts or hotel soaps in his gym bag, they still saw me as weak, not kind, not loyal, not patient, just stupid. I slid down the wall slowly, the cold trim pressing against my spine, and sat there on the floor. Shoes still on, rain dripping off my coat, listening to them decide what parts of my life to carve up next. Somewhere between Evelyn's plan to suggest a will update and Daniel's joke about having me sign it over in exchange for a date night, I stopped hearing their words. Everything went quiet. My ears were ringing. I stared ahead at the family photo hanging crooked by the front door. Us on some beach vacation 5 years ago. Daniel's hand clamped on my shoulder like a claw. I looked so happy, but I couldn't remember the moment. Not really, just the photo, the performance. I wasn't going to be in their next picture. Something in me shifted right there in that hallway. Something slow and deep, like a ship changing direction miles below the surface. I didn't know exactly what I'd do yet, but I knew this. They would never get what they wanted from me. Not that house, not those apartments, not one more minute of obedience. I stood up, picked up my purse, and stepped out of the house like a shadow. They never even heard me leave. I didn't slam the door. I didn't stomp down the steps. I didn't even pull out of the driveway like someone who had just discovered her husband and his mother were plotting to rob her blind. I turned the key, reversed calmly, and drove off with the same smooth left turn I used every day. Like I was going to the store. Like I was just running errands. Because if they didn't hear me come in, I sure as hell wasn't going to give them the privilege of hearing me leave. My hands were steady. Too steady. I drove for blocks without the radio on, the hum of the engine and my own thoughts keeping pace like old friends who didn't need to speak anymore. I passed the coffee shop where Daniel used to fake meetings. I passed the pharmacy where I picked up Evelyn's blood pressure meds every month. I passed our dry cleaner, the one where the woman behind the counter used to whisper to me that I deserved better. She had no idea how right she was. Olena didn't ask a single thing when she opened her door. Just stepped aside, eyes wide but mouth shut, and motioned toward the guest room. I kicked off my shoes, set my purse on the nightstand, and finally exhaled. My coat was still damp, my shoulders sore from holding in the storm I hadn't let loose. I didn't cry. I opened my laptop. 3 manila folders came out of my bag. 2 rental deeds and 1 notarized certificate of ownership for the dacha in the Carpathians. I laid them on the bed like sacred texts. Page by page, I read through every clause, every paragraph. I cross-checked names, dates, registration numbers. I called the lawyer's emergency line and asked her to confirm, again, that all transfers were fully complete. "Every title is yours," she said, voice calm and certain. "There is no shared claim, not from your husband, not from anyone." I didn't say thank you, just hung up and stared at the glowing screen of my laptop. A spreadsheet opened beside me where I'd tracked rent payments for the last year. I started calculating. Monthly income from the Lviv units, estimated upkeep. Property taxes, legal shielding options. I even began drafting an email to a property management agency I'd been vetting, asking about service plans that would eliminate my need to interact with tenants at all. By midnight, I had 3 open bank tabs, a new email address, and a fresh spreadsheet named Independence Final Draft. I didn't sleep that night. Elena padded in around 2 with a cup of chamomile tea and said nothing. She left it on the nightstand and gently touched my shoulder as she passed. It was the only time I felt the knot in my chest loosen, just for a moment. Daniel texted again around 1:14 a.m. "Where are you?" No punctuation, no concern, just entitlement. I didn't answer. I clicked open a new tab and started researching LLC formation in my state. Quietly. Precisely. With the same methodical calm I used when balancing our household budget while Daniel bought new golf clubs on promotion. With the same patience I used when Evelyn left dishes in the sink for 3 days and I cleaned them without a word. But this wasn't housework. This was exit work, and I was good at it. By 3 a.m., I had the LLC name reserved, the forms half filled, and a checklist of everything I'd need to move the apartments under it. It was almost funny. Evelyn thought I was too soft to own property. Daniel thought I was too dim to handle tax forms. Turns out, all their underestimating had kept me hidden in plain sight. I watched the sunrise through Elena's window, pink and gold behind a half-dead oak tree. I used to think I'd feel sad if I ever left him. Regretful, like I'd failed. But all I felt was space. Not emptiness, just air. Space to breathe. Space to think. Space to finally stop tiptoeing around the 2 people who had mistaken my silence for ignorance. I didn't need revenge. I just needed distance and a clean, irreversible break. Daniel's texts came in late, like an afterthought. First, "Where are you?" Then, half an hour later, "You took the car?" That second one said more than he realized. Not, "Are you okay?" Not, "Please call me." Just an accusation wrapped in faux confusion. It was the tone of a man who believed his belongings had been misplaced, not that his wife had left. I didn't respond. I didn't block him either. I wanted to see just how long it would take for silence to do what my words never could. The next morning, Evelyn's voice cracked through my voicemail like a fork on glass. "Breakfast is cold. Again, don't know what's gotten into you. Daniel's worried. Call me." I listened to it once, then deleted it. No saving, no re-listening for venom. She was someone else's problem now. If Daniel was worried, he could heat his own damn eggs for once. Or better yet, let Evelyn lecture him while she microwaved frozen pancakes and tried to pass them off as homemade. By noon, I'd done more than he'd ever know. I walked into the post office with 3 printed forms and redirected all mail, bills, bank statements, legal notices, to my grandmother's lawyer's office downtown. I wasn't hiding. I was relocating my orbit. Let them spin in place, confused, while I rewrote the map. Next, the properties. I had a list already, color-coded, green for completed, yellow for pending. I spent that afternoon at a cafe near Olena's, head down, laptop open, earbuds in. I signed the contracts for the property management agency I'd chosen. They'd handle everything: rent collection, repairs, tenant screening. I added an auto-forward to the rental emails and copied the lease agreements into a new digital folder, this one named with a date and a title: My Life, No Daniel. Then I called the bank. I opened a new account in just my name. No joint access, no linked cards, no way to trace it unless you were me, with my ID sitting at that desk, smiling politely while the teller clicked through boxes she barely understood. "Do you want checks?" she asked. "No," I said. "I want silence." I rerouted the rent income there, scheduled transfers from the tenant accounts to the new trust account I'd set up for the dacha. Within 48 hours, everything that mattered was moving through hands I chose. People with contracts, with oversight, not blood ties and emotional blackmail. That night, I let myself feel something. Not sadness, just weight, like a coat I could finally take off. I stood in Elena's shower, water hot and relentless, and let it hit my face until my skin turned pink. I leaned against the tile and thought about Evelyn calling me ungrateful for not thanking her after I bought her a new mattress last year. I thought about Daniel making jokes about my little inheritance like it was a hobby I didn't earn. I thought about the time he told his coworker I was too nice to leave, and I smiled, because I already had. He just didn't know it yet. The part that hurt most wasn't the betrayal. It was the ease of it. How quickly they moved into planning. How natural it was for them to take. I wasn't even cold yet, and they were circling like I'd died and left the lights on. But now I was unreachable. I'd called the phone company and changed my number. Not blocked. Burned. I chose a number I hadn't used in over a decade, one tied to nothing but my own past. I didn't tell Elena, didn't tell the lawyer, didn't save it in my own phone. I let it live in my memory, the way people used to remember directions before GPS. I didn't leave a note. No keys on the counter, no weepy message on the fridge. The house was still standing. But the wife? She was gone. 3 days of silence must have felt like eternity for Daniel. Not because he missed me, not because he loved me, because silence meant control had slipped. And Daniel never liked when he didn't know which way the leash was swinging. It was mid-morning when he showed up. Elena and I had just finished breakfast. Eggs, toast, a quiet that didn't need filling. We were rinsing dishes when the knock came, sharp and impatient. I didn't jump. Elena didn't move. We both knew it wasn't a delivery. Second knock, louder. Same rhythm Daniel used when Evelyn forgot her keys and banged on the back door like a SWAT team. I looked through the peephole and there he was, arms crossed, lips pressed tight in a way that screamed, "I'm trying to look concerned, but I'm actually furious you're not doing what I expected." I opened the door just wide enough that he couldn't see past me. He looked like he'd slept in his car. Hoodie wrinkled, eyes sunken, jaw twitching from whatever internal monologue he'd been rehearsing on the way over. But what struck me most was the absence of concern. He didn't ask if I was safe, didn't look relieved. He looked inconvenienced. "Really?" he said. "This is what we're doing now?" No greeting, no apology. I didn't answer. He shifted his weight, eyeing the inside like he had a right to it. "You took the car. You ghosted. My mom's been calling hospitals." That part almost made me laugh. Evelyn probably called the urgent care next to her salon and left a voicemail saying I was mentally unstable. I could picture it clearly. She was probably still eating breakfast at our kitchen table like nothing happened, still talking about me in third person, like I was a burden she couldn't wait to shed. Daniel gestured vaguely behind me. "Can we talk? Like adults?" I tilted my head. "Sure," I said. "Answer one thing first." He blinked. "What?" I stepped outside just enough to let the light hit his face. "Who's stupid now?" He didn't move, didn't blink, just stood there like I'd slapped him without touching him. Because in his world, I wasn't supposed to know. I wasn't supposed to hear what he said. I wasn't supposed to walk out. I was supposed to cry, to plead, to ask what I did wrong. But instead, I was calm. And that scared him more than rage ever could. His mouth opened, closed. Then he looked down, like maybe the sidewalk would give him an answer. I didn't wait for him to find one. I stepped back and shut the door. No slam, no dramatics, just a clean click. I turned to find Elena in the hallway, holding a tiny black device between two fingers. "Camera's got audio," she said. "Always has." I took it from her, scrolled back, and hit play. There he was. Every word. The tone. The arrogance, the moment his face fell when he realized the story in his head had crumbled. It was all there, his voice saying, "You're overreacting," followed by my question slicing straight through his ego. Proof. Proof of his condescension. Proof of his guilt. Proof that I didn't have to explain this to anyone. Because now I didn't have to say a word. I could just hit play. I backed up the file, saved it, renamed it on my laptop. Uninvited guest, 10:14 a.m. That night, I didn't talk about it. Elena poured us wine. We watched reruns of shows I'd missed. I let myself smile at dumb jokes and fall asleep on her couch with a blanket that smelled like eucalyptus. And when I woke up, I realized something. Daniel didn't show up because he wanted me back. He showed up because he wanted what I had. And now I had something he'd never get back. My silence. Weaponized. Archived. Admissible. On Monday morning, I walked into my lawyer's office with a thumb drive, a list of tasks, and zero appetite for discussion. I wasn't asking for help. I was hiring firepower. "First," I said, sliding the folder across the table, "I want all 3 properties locked down. No transfer, no liens, no sale without triple authentication." The lawyer raised an eyebrow. "Expecting interference?" "I already heard it," I said flatly. I just want the law to hear me louder. She got to work. By the afternoon, we'd filed property protection notices across 2 jurisdictions. Daniel's name wasn't on any title, but I wasn't naive. Men like him, coached by mothers like Evelyn, knew how to wiggle into claims. They'd cry spousal contribution, throw around phrases like shared asset or verbal agreement. They'd weaponize dinner receipts and Christmas trips to suggest investment. So I filed notices in anticipation, not reaction, preemptive strikes dressed as paperwork. Next, I opened the LLC, simple name, clean EIN, bank account routed to the same institution that held the property management accounts. All rental income, repairs, tenant issues, now wrapped in corporate shielding. I wasn't the landlord anymore. The LLC was. I just happened to be the sole managing member with signature rights. After that came the dacha, the house in the mountains, my grandmother's retreat, the one Evelyn said Daniel deserved. It now sat in a family trust under my name and my future nieces. No claim from spouses, current or future, no inheritance battles, no surprise will contests. If anything happened to me, it would go to someone who actually valued the soil beneath it, not the resale value of the fence. I signed the papers in silence, every pen stroke like a stitch in armor. When the lawyer slid the final document toward me, I paused. "This covers everything?" I asked. "Everything," she nodded, "even the home you currently reside in." I smirked. That little detail always amused me, because technically our house, the one Daniel bragged about furnishing, the one Evelyn claimed she made a home, was a rental. Leased from an account in my name, paid for through my inheritance, registered through a shell LLC I'd set up 2 years ago when my grandmother first fell ill and whispered, "Protect yourself, sweetheart." I'd done exactly that. Daniel never asked whose name was on the lease. He just assumed it was ours. And now? He'd have to ask permission just to enter the front door. When I left the office, the sky was low and gray, that pre-storm kind of heavy. I drove back to Olena's and past our old block, slow enough to see the lights still on in the living room. Evelyn's silhouette was by the window, pacing. Probably on the phone, probably telling someone I was having an episode or being difficult. The 2 things she used to say when I set a boundary or dared to nap. I didn't stop, didn't wave, didn't flinch. That night, I emailed the lawyer a final request. Draft a cease and desist for any contact attempts related to property or financial matters. Daniel's name was to be filtered, Evelyn's too. I wanted everything in writing through lawyers in case the 2 of them decided to start playing legal chicken. Because now I had walls they couldn't scale. And more importantly, I had time. Time to rebuild, uninterrupted. Time to plan the next move, undistracted. Time to become someone they wouldn't even recognize, because I wasn't anyone's fool anymore. I wasn't the stupid one. I was the owner of the homes, of the accounts, of the silence that made them squirm. I didn't dress up for her. No power suit, no dramatic red lipstick, just a gray sweater, clean jeans, and the same flats I used to wear to doctor's appointments when I escorted her into clinics she never thanked me for. I didn't go to make a scene. I went to make a point. Quiet, sharp, irreversible. Evelyn lived in a rent-controlled apartment complex she bragged about constantly. Old building, but prime location. What she never mentioned was how she ended up there. My grandmother had bought the building 20 years ago during one of those market dips. Quietly, discreetly. One of her safety net projects, she'd called it. Evelyn moved in after her surgery, and when my grandmother passed, no one told her the lease had changed hands. And by no one, I mean me. I let her assume, let her decorate, let her believe she'd earned a right to stay. Now, I was here to end the misunderstanding. She opened the door with that smug twist to her mouth she probably practiced in mirrors, still in her robe, slippers dragging like royalty with gout. I didn't offer a greeting. I held up the letter. "Oh," she said, blinking once. "You finally come to your senses?" I stepped inside without asking. Her apartment smelled like instant soup and lavender dryer sheets, that sterile mix of control and decay. "I assume you're here to make things right," she said, voice rising with performative authority. "Daniel told me you're having a moment. We've been generous with our patience." I handed her the envelope. She took it with the exaggerated grace of someone accepting a donation. The paper was thick, watermarked. My lawyer insisted on that. Makes it harder to pretend it's fake, she'd said. Perception matters. Evelyn squinted at the heading, then scanned down. I watched her lips move silently as she read. She didn't get far. The moment her eyes hit effective immediately, her jaw tightened. Her skin didn't flush, it blanched, the way skin does when the blood runs somewhere deeper, somewhere colder. You can't be serious, she whispered. I am, I said. This is my home. No, I said softly. It was my grandmother's. Now it's mine. She looked up, hands trembling slightly. Where am I supposed to go? That's between you and your son. I didn't offer pity, didn't fill the silence. I let it stretch until her breathing got shallow and frantic. Her mouth opened again, probably to blame Danielle, probably to ask for an exception, probably to accuse me of being heartless. But I didn't give her the space. I suggest you start packing, I said. The locks change in 10 days. The movers will be scheduled before then, at your expense. You can't. I can, I interrupted. And I did. The notice is filed. The deed is attached. The lease is terminated. You've been squatting. That word hit her like a slap. Her hand twitched toward the letter like she might tear it up. I stepped back. Not out of fear, just distance. I wasn't going to wrestle over paper. I already had the original. This was a courtesy copy, a performance for the last act of her fantasy. You've changed, she spat. No, I said. You just ran out of leverage. I turned before she could reply. Her words followed me out, brittle and furious. You'll regret this. Daniel won't forget what you've done. I didn't even glance back. The elevator dinged as I stepped in, and I caught my reflection in the steel. Calm, pale, but steady. I looked like someone who didn't owe anyone a damn thing. When I got outside, I took one long breath and didn't exhale until I was halfway down the block. My phone buzzed. An unknown number, probably Daniel. I let it ring. Let them both stew. Let them feel the weight of consequences I no longer had to carry. The apartment was mine. The silence was mine. And now, the eviction was hers. He chose the place we used to go when we were still pretending to be happy. Some mid-tier steakhouse with soft jazz and dim lighting where the wine list was overpriced and the bread always stale. I showed up exactly 5 minutes late. Not enough to be rude, just enough to remind him I wasn't waiting anymore. He stood when I walked in, all artificial charm and buttoned-up remorse. Hey, he said like nothing had happened. Like the last month hadn't unraveled the scaffolding of our entire life. You look good. I didn't reply, just hung my coat neatly over the chair and sat down. The table was set for two, one candle between us, a theater prop. I could almost hear Evelyn's voice in the back of my mind, coaching him on what to say. Act humble, make her feel heard, then pivot to the paperwork. The waiter came, asked if I wanted wine. I declined. Daniel ordered a bottle anyway, like always, assuming I'd come around by the second glass. So, he said, exhaling like he was bracing for some big speech, I've been thinking. About us. About everything. I waited. I know things got out of hand, he continued, trying for that low, serious tone he used when clients were about to walk away. And I take responsibility, for my part. But I think we rushed into this, whatever this is. He gestured vaguely, like my silence was a cloud he could wave away. We've built something, you know, and I just think it'd be a shame to throw that away, especially when we could share things, fairly, mutually. Ah, there it was. He didn't want reconciliation. He wanted assets. I reached into my bag, pulled out a white folder, and laid it on the table. What's this? He asked, brows furrowing. Transcripts, I said. He blinked. Of what? Your words. From Olena's security camera. From our house. From the voicemail Evelyn left the day after I left. All cleaned up, time-stamped, and indexed. He opened it. The first page alone had 3 of his greatest hits. She's passive and stupid. She'll hand it over. I trained her not to argue. By page 2, his expression had changed. Page 3, he stopped flipping. The jazz music faded into a muffled background hum, like even the saxophone felt awkward now. I picked up my napkin, folded it once, and placed it back on the table. This isn't a negotiation, I said calmly. This is a notice. He looked up, face tight. You're serious. Effective immediately, I said, sliding the second sheet toward him. The locks change tomorrow. You'll receive final paperwork by mail. Anything still in the house is considered abandoned property. But I live there, he snapped, dropping the mask. You can't just... I can, I cut in, and I did. The lease is in my name. Your name was never on it. Evelyn's eviction process is already underway. This is the last courtesy you're getting. His mouth opened, closed, then twisted into that pouty scowl he wore when things didn't go his way, like a child scolded at a birthday party. You're being cruel. No, I said. I'm being thorough. I stood, slung my bag over my shoulder, and looked him in the eye one last time. For what it's worth, I said, I used to wish you'd just say thank you. For the dinners, for the bills, for the late-night pharmacy runs for your mother's pills. But you never did. He didn't move, didn't speak. You don't have to now, I added. I've already written the ending. As I walked out, I didn't look back. Outside, the air was cold but clean. For the first time in years, I felt weightless, like I'd been walking underwater without knowing it, and someone had finally pulled me to the surface. Daniel was still at that table, staring at the evidence of his own mouth, wondering how the woman he underestimated had outmaneuvered him without raising her voice. He'd wanted a wife who wouldn't argue. Now he had silence. Permanently. By March, the snow was melting in patches around the edges of the dacha, softening the landscape into something quiet and alive. Morning frost on the porch railing, birds picking at leftover seed near the fence, and the smell of pine that clung to your clothes like a memory you didn't want to wash off. I didn't need much. The house was small, but mine. The kind of silence that used to feel like loneliness now felt like a blessing. No footsteps upstairs. No muttered judgments from the next room. No tension coiled in the kitchen waiting to snap. Just the wind brushing the trees and the occasional creak of old wood shifting like it was finally able to breathe too. Olena started coming on weekends, sometimes just for tea, sometimes with pastries from that little bakery we used to pass on the way to Evelyn's appointments. We didn't talk about the past, not because we were avoiding it, but because it no longer needed a name. Some ghosts just fade better in peace than in exorcism. One afternoon, while we were trimming back the frozen hydrangeas along the path, she asked, "Do you miss the city?" I shook my head, brushing soil off my gloves. Not the city, just who I thought I was there. We let that hang. It didn't need explaining. A few neighbors introduced themselves, older couples with thick accents and slow smiles. They didn't ask why I'd moved out here alone. They just nodded when I said I needed stillness. Offered firewood, jam, silence. I heard through someone, I forget who, that Daniel moved back in with Evelyn. Apparently she didn't handle the eviction well, made a fuss about being blindsided, claimed I manipulated the will, tried to stir up sympathy, but without a legal leg to stand on, all she really had was a folding chair in the courtroom hallway and a purse full of indignation. Daniel? He told mutual friends I was cold, said I overreacted, even said I must have had someone else lined up because a woman doesn't just walk away unless she's already got a landing. That part made me laugh. He still couldn't imagine I'd leave because I'd had enough, that I'd walk away not for someone else, but for no one, for myself. A friend texted me once, "He still says you were passive." I didn't respond, because I was, for a long time, passive in my patience, in my sacrifice, in my willingness to let things slide so the house stayed calm and the dinner stayed warm. But passive is not the same as powerless. Passive people don't raise their voice, they raise their standards. The locks changed. The leases shifted, the names disappeared, the documents stacked like bricks between my past and anything that might try to crawl back from it. I started a small garden out behind the dacha, grew herbs in mismatched pots along the windowsill, painted one of the bedrooms a soft green and turned it into a little studio with a desk and a chair that didn't creak every time I exhaled. No emails from Daniel, no voicemails from Evelyn, just one official envelope, returned unopened. I didn't send it again. There was no need. Some things don't need closure, they need distance, and I had it, along with 3 properties, a clean bank account, and a peace they never could have tolerated. They played a long game of manipulation. I played a quiet game of exit. They assumed I'd scream, fight, break dishes, plead. Instead, I vanished, with everything they wanted, and all they were left with was each other.